introduction, and I would request the slides to be up, please. So as they would be up, so I will just introduce myself. I'm Neha Pahuja, Senior Sustainability Lead based out of India, representing Boeing. And today I'm here to discuss something about how to get aviation sector as a whole to net zero by 2050 and what are the recent updates about CORSIA, etc. So first off, just revamp what we discussed earlier today. The aviation sector's contribution to global climate change, we contribute 2% or nearly 2.5% of the global emissions as far as all the sectors are considered. It might sound that we are contributing less, it's only 2%. But we should keep in mind that other sectors which are listed here, like energy, industry, etc., there the mitigation opportunities are higher, much more, and the cost of mitigating emissions are less. So they might mitigate emissions much faster than we do. And in our sector, the growth will happen now. We are in a high growth pathway. So the emissions are bound to grow. That's all the more reason that the entire community came together. Next slide, please. When in 2016 they agreed upon a mechanism, a market-based mechanism, which was for the entire sector, where international aviation was covered. It was a market-based mechanism, wanting countries or parties to limit their emissions or cap their emissions by 2020 levels. The 2020 sign was again, or mark was again changed, which I'll read to you in the following slides, but we agreed upon in 2016 a market-based mechanism, which was the first ever sectoral market-based mechanism globally. The entire sector had the mandate to cap their emissions by 2020 levels. So it was a carbon neutral goal, and now we have progressed from a carbon neutral goal beyond 2020 to a carbon neutral by 2050. So we are now going towards a net zero by 2050. So how that happened? So from 2016 we agreed on the carbon market mechanism, MVM, or the CORSIA, which we know as of now. In 2018, SARTs, or Standard Implementation Methodologies, were agreed as an annex to Chicago Convention 16.4, which is the Bible for us when it comes to implementing the CORSIA mechanism. Then it was piloted in 2019, but around 2021, IATA AGM discussed, and all the leaders from the sector came together and wanted to do more. And at the same time, periodic review was going on, which wanted to review what is the progress on the CORSIA goals. So the periodic review was going on, and here the industry leaders meet and they sort of assess that CORSIA is good if we are capping the emissions, if we are wanting to limit a further growth of the emissions. But we want to go further and have deep cuts in our emissions, and therefore the industry came together and came with a carbon neutral goal or vision by 2050. So it was an industry vision passed as a IATA resolution, where we agreed to, or the industry came together and said that we can come up with a resolution to be carbon neutral by 2050. And this and the periodic review findings led to international community coming together and agreeing to a long-term aviation goal, or LTAG, in 2022, which means that the entire sector would be carbon neutral or net zero by 2050. Next slide, please. And along with that, the ICAO also came up with 5 basket of measures, and first one was technology improvement, meaning better advanced technology, switching to better advanced technology so that we reduce our emissions. Air traffic management, which means that we optimize our aerospace and so that we are able to achieve better efficiency, operational efficiency. Thirdly, sustainable aviation fuel, use of sustainable aviation fuel, and it is sort of established that we can perhaps achieve 80% reduction in our emissions if we switch to sustainable aviation fuels. And whatever is not covered by these three can again be covered through CORSIA, which is a market-based instrument. Next slide, please. And in this discussion, I will be focusing on CORSIA. So what exactly is CORSIA? It is a market-based agreement or mechanism which was agreed in 2016. And following that, and initially it was 2020 baseline, but in 2020 COVID struck and the emissions go down. So again, in the following year, it was discussed that perhaps we should move the baseline to something else beyond other than 2020. So it was discussed that the baseline would be 2019, 85% of 2019 emissions. So we moved the baseline to 2029, 85% of 2029 from 2020. So now we are all geared towards capping our emissions to 2019 base idea. And this would mean that we need emissions which are to the value of 2.5 billion gigatons. So this by 2035, 2.5 billion tons of mitigation emissions could be limited. Next slide. Now, if we talk about timelines, so in the CORSIA, it started with a voluntary phase or pilot phase where the country was set up like a pilot, and then the voluntary phase where countries were given option whether they want to comply or fall under CORSIA or not. And now in 2027, all the parties would be mandated to follow CORSIA regime. As of now, we have 129 parties which would be following or under the mandatory regime. Next slide, please. So here, if you see, the countries which are in green, they are at the moment part of the CORSIA regime or fall under CORSIA regime, meaning that they have to limit their emissions and go towards or use away the offset mechanism provided by CORSIA to limit their emissions. The countries highlighted in blues would fall under mandatory phase of CORSIA. And the ones which are marked in yellow are countries which are exempt from being applicable under the CORSIA regime because they are either LDCs or SIDs. Next slide. And so the mechanisms is set 2027 we are going to fall in the mandatory regime, most of the parties, but still there are challenges in terms of whether we have the demand or not. So I just want to update you, those challenges are there, but last year in COP29, another update happened. I mean, I'm just updating you that Article 6.4 was agreed upon, and their use for the offset generated under Article 6.4 use under CORSIA regime was made possible. For that, there is a simple procedure of having a letter of authorization signed by the country itself, so that there is no double counting under UNFCCC and under ICAO's CORSIA regime. So that is the additional layers beyond what is there in the ICAO system. Next slide. So just to summarize how we stand in the CORSIA setup right now, so there are 129 parties to it. Then in terms of the programs which can generate offsets, there are 11 programs and 4 going forward would be added to the list. Again, there is a mechanism where you can reduce your offset mandate by using more of SEF meaning CORSIA eligible fuel, which is SAF or LTAF. So you can reduce your offset obligation by using more SAF. Now, this is the current status, but I also want to point out that recently there was a paper which was published which said that going forward by 2035, we would need 1.38 billion carbon credits, which could mean that 62 billion investments by 2035. However, it should be noted that as of now, what we have available is 15 million carbon offsets. So there is a huge gap. What I want to say is that the gap is there are challenges, but there would be possibility that we have or we can sustain growth in the offsets which are available, or we do in-sector achievements which can limit the need to have more offsets. Next slide. So I want to come back to this slide where I just want to remind you that we are all working towards the 2050 net zero goal that we have, or LTAG, and with that in mind, I also want to point out that we have basket of measures which can help us reach there. We have aircraft efficiencies, we have operational efficiencies, we have market-based mechanism. Market-based mechanism is not the only way, but it is one of the important ways. Next slide. Now the entire system, the community, international community is working towards the same goal. And with that, I would like to update you as in what are the recent steps that the community has come forward with. The first thing which I would point out is the conference on alternate aviation fuels, which focused on a goal for the industry as such to move away or shift away from fossil fuel to cleaner fuels. And here they agreed upon, we as an international aviation community agreed upon 5% of improvement in carbon intensity by 2030, sorry. Previous slide. And along with that, there was a global framework which was agreed upon, intending to support achievement of this goal. And when we talk about the framework includes things like ACT-SAF projects, where simple things like country engagements happen on feasibility of feedstock and finding available SAF in particular country, finding opportunities or business plans for opportunities that could have more refineries in a particular country to enable have more production of SAF. So ACT-SAF projects were developed, concept of ACT-SAF project and support for that was discussed and is there. Then secondly, on financing, because it is a major challenge, finance is required. So FinVest Hub was created, where matchmaking sort of happens between the projects and proposals and financing instruments. So that is also put in place to this end. And lastly, enabling mechanism, like how do we account for SAF when we calculate the obligations for offset obligations. So this global framework was agreed upon in 2023. Next slide. Then case 13, we come to case 13, which is the Committee of Environmental Protection meeting every 3 years. And in this meeting, they sort of discuss a lot of other issues and came up with, which encompass carbon, dealt with noise, environmental pollution, etc. But what was the key outcome was the adoption of a global system to track the progress on your LTAG. So the long-term aspiration goal is there, how well we are progressing towards that. A monitoring system would be put in place going forward. So this was the key achievement, that there is mobilization on developing a monitoring framework which would assess how well we are on or how on track we are towards the long-term aspirational goal. And whatever we agree, the activities that has happened or are happening in CAPES 13 would be presented to the council and then agreed upon by the assembly in October this year. Next slide. One of the key activities which happened recently was the Aviation Climate Week, an event where all the stakeholders came together to assess the progress, to go beyond policy to action and focus more on action and implementation. How well are we doing on the action side of it and implementation side of it? The entire community look into the CAPS 3 outcome and global framework for that and a lot of other things. Next slide. And in rest of the year, there are a couple of many milestones that would be taken by the international community going forward that would that are in place to go through the LMR progress or monitoring and review process and establishing an outcome that would be presented to the council and then assembly. Next slide. But I also want you to make a note of this. Things are happening internationally and globally, but we as stakeholders, important stakeholders, have to have the perspective of the 2050 goal and mobilize activities that would help achieve that goal. And Boeing is committed to the international or industry's goal to be net zero by 2050 and will be happy to help if it is required. Thank you.